welcome everyone. And thanks for the introduction, Jason. I have the distinct privilege of working for Atlassian as part of our enterprise advocates team, specifically as a solutions engineer. And what that means is that I work with Jason and all the partners that are outside here today on many of our largest accounts, some of the biggest projects, the biggest teams. And that experience for me individually extends across a number of different companies and projects in the past. I'm actually based in Sydney. Currently, I'm originally from the US, but I'm based in Sydney. I've worked for Atlassian for about a year, but I've worked for companies in Australia, in the UK, and in the United States as well. I've worked in technology for just over 27 years, and 20 of those have been specifically in solutions consulting, in pre-sales. I've worked with large teams, I've been part of large teams, I've managed small to large teams. Some good and some great, and that really leads to the focus point of today's session. Really talking about not only the products that Atlassian offers and our core objective around unleashing the full potential in every team, but what that means not only in terms of technology, but in terms of best practices and cultural changes, some of which Jason has already described, in order to really make those teams fully successful. So part of the draw for me individually in coming to Atlassian was because of this alignment on having managed teams in the past, having seen elements of what makes a team function exceptionally well, and knowing that that's the main corporate goal for Atlassian. That for me individually was a large part of the draw to this company. If you think of examples of really successful companies, you will quite often associate that to one individual. And I'm sure most everyone can pick out one or more of the faces that are being shown here as examples. But we'll take one at a time. Apple with Steve Jobs. You might think of Steve Wozniak as well, but certainly Jobs' face is most closely associated with Apple. But even in the early days of that company, there were a tremendous amount of people. There was quite a large team that worked as part of making Apple into what it is today. Same holds true for Elon Musk and Tesla. He's the one you always see in the news, right? He's the one you always see in the different reports. But even from early on, especially with the technologies that they deal in, again, a pretty decently sized team was involved in making that happen. This guy likely needs no introduction, but he definitely received help from a number of different areas, some more colorful than others. But Facebook was no exception in terms of requiring a lot of people to turn it into what it is today. We like to focus a lot on the positive aspects of when teams work really well, but I think we also have seen examples of maybe teams that didn't work out so well. And if you do end up on one of these teams, and I'm sure we have at some point in the past, please make sure you're at least not this guy. But looking across a variety of different teams, and again, I do this even with my own background, you start to think back on the ones that worked really well and what it was that contributed to making them so successful. Was it a particular individual? Was it a particular manager? A specific methodology? It almost seems difficult to isolate what those elements are. Between my own experiences and what we've seen at Atlassian, we can distill it into kind of four main ingredients of, as the title to this session indicates, a secret sauce, if you will, for what we see as consistent elements of a successful team. They all fall under a larger umbrella of what I'll categorize as providing some psychological safety for the team. Won't be that obvious up front, but by the time we get through a few examples, I think this will become a bit clearer. Those four main portions are, of course, how the team is structured, because you can set up an organization any number of ways. So what are the common structures that we've seen at Atlassian that seem to maximize a team's potential? What's the mindset, kind of what's the shared way in specific to software teams, for example, developing? You know, what are the rituals and the processes and the methodologies that they use that get them to perform so well? What kind of support across the company do they have? And this really comes from the top down. What does executive management and staff provide in order to ensure that all the individual employees' needs can be met within the organization? And what's the direction for the company? What are the main objectives? You know, I've talked about with Atlassian and what our kind of our core mission statement is. But what's the direction for the company, not only initially, but over time? Because obviously this changes, and especially in technology, this can change quite rapidly. Each of these four fall into providing some type of secret sauce. You'll see it in different proportions depending on the company and the vertical involved. But these definitely are four key themes that we see over and over again. Providing a compelling direction to keep all the staff focused on one primary goal for the company. Giving them enough support and the context and the processes around that to ensure they can do their jobs effectively. Both in terms of processes and how the teams themselves are structured, and fitting everyone into a particular mindset to hiring profile so that they're all inherently working along a similar vein. And on this last point, I think the biggest testament to that for me was when I had just started with the company for a couple of months and had one of my friends visit on a Friday. And as he spoke with a number of other employees in our Sydney office, he said, you know, I can see Atlassian has a very distinct hiring profile. Like, you guys all operate in a very similar way. And I think that's good. I think hiring for the right DNA, hiring for the right mindset is just as important as technical skills. So cultural fit as well as other skills are key. But we'll start with a compelling direction, kind of setting the criteria, setting the marching orders, if you will, for the company itself. Because there are certainly a number of ways in which this can be done. I think a lot of us have seen kind of this approach where you're effectively given a constellation of, here, just do this, do this, do this. You know, make sure this happens, make sure this deadline is met, make sure this feature is provided by this release date. You're literally flooded with a whole constellation of things that need to be done, and left to sort out how to prioritize them, and managers have discussions on shifting priorities and what your workload will be for the day. This is certainly one approach. I've worked in those environments. It comes with its own advantages. The way that we do it, however, at Atlassian is we kind of scrap all of this. We don't focus so much on how things need to be done, but what we need to have happen. And the analogy we use is, rather than sifting through a constellation of ideas, we simply give the company a North Star. You know, what's the main thing that we want to get to? And then internally we build 4 layers of definitions around that. So we start with our overall vision, what I had mentioned about unleashing the full potential of every team. We divide that down into some key themes, and this cuts across all of our product lines. What are the high-level types of elements that we want to make sure we're tackling in each of the solutions that Atlassian provides? What are the focus areas off of that? Kind of what are the individual stories or task-level details that we want to have done? Kind of how are we going to achieve these? And most importantly, and this is a phrase that you hear within Atlassian over and over and over again, it's great to have these concepts on kind of a vision and some themes, but what does success look like? How do we know when we've gotten there? How can we measure this? So defining the vision, setting themes is great, but measurement is equally important, if not more so. This is what we'll call in Atlassian, of course we're a software company, right? So everything has to be an acronym. This is what we call our VTFM. So if you ever hear that phrase from an Atlassian anyway, we're talking about our core objectives for the company. What's our vision, our themes, our focus, and our measures. And this exists for every operational department within Atlassian. But it can look a bit confusing for an outsider. You know, a VT what? Like, what's going on here? I don't understand this. Again, it's just setting the direction to that North Star and allowing teams to do a lot more on their own. But a core part of that is leaving some of the criteria to them with a bit of guidance, though. So our co-founders and senior managers will be part of building out that VTFM. They won't micromanage, though. They won't tell you how to get things done. They'll just say, maybe here's some recommendations or priorities that we've seen based on our own experiences. We want to make sure that things stay aligned within different departments inside Atlassian. And sometimes you just need a fresh perspective because as you get down into the details on establishing this VTFM for one area, sometimes just a second set of eyes is the best quality assurance. So this occurs as part of our VTFM updates, but ultimately in terms of executing against that plan, we leave the decisions to the people who are closer to those areas. So the product managers, the engineers, the QA test individuals, that's all delegated down to them. We simply define, here's our true north, here's how we're gonna measure, here's what success looks like. You sort out how we get there. We completely leave that to you. And it falls very much in line, as you'll hear throughout the day today, with this agile methodology, right? There's no longer a centralized command and control, what Jason had talked about earlier, but just define the main elements of what you want to have occur and let the team sort out the best way to make it happen. This is what we've seen as crucial for really accelerating team proficiency. It also means, though, that we need to be very open internally on sharing that information. So all the different departments, VTFMs, it's all made publicly accessible on our intranet. This is something that is posted and revised and made accessible to everyone. I can look at our engineering's VTFM plan right now. I can look at finance. I can look at, for my own enterprise advocates team, I can see this at any point. Making those goals transparent is a key thing to ensure that everyone gets a say and everyone understands why things are being done a certain way as well. Now, I mentioned earlier, part of shifting off that centralized command and control to setting this criteria makes measurement very, very important, right? You want to make sure you're getting there on track. So we use a lot of measurements to check that consistently. And specifically for our software teams, one measurement that I think many of you will be familiar with is our Net Promoter Score, or our NPS. And we track that consistently. And a weekly report is sent out to pretty much the entire company, showing the NPS and how it's deviated week on week, and any other commentary around that. So everybody gets this list on how we're doing. Not only how our managers think we're doing compared to measurements they've defined, but how our customers are telling us we're doing as well, as they have their own interactions, as they work with support, as they request new features. But a Net Promoter Score is one key measurement that we look at to ensure that we stay on track. However, we get input from a lot of places. A lot of different opinions internally, issues that get raised and escalated through support. Some of you are able to even give us direct feedback, either through our support website or some of the partners through a partner portal that we make available to them. And we take all of that very seriously and allow you to vote on issues that you think are most important to you as well. So some of the two other key metrics that we look at here is our user impact score. So we have publicly available jira.atlassian.com. If you are familiar with an issue, or if you want to search to see if something you've encountered has happened before or a new feature has been requested before, you can go to that website and you can upvote, you can +1 any particular item you see there. And we have some issues that get thousands of votes, and our product managers look at that. You know, they take that very seriously in terms of prioritizing their own backlog for the products that fall under their responsibility. And we look at that on more of a democratic basis for all customers, and we also look at it specifically for enterprise accounts. Today, the rest of the afternoon anyway, is more about getting you familiar with some of the products that Jason had called out. But you can deploy those products a couple of different ways. And for our larger scale installations, for our enterprise customers, quite often you'll see a data center deployment option, which means it's being scaled across lots of servers. It's meant to accommodate tens of thousands of users logging in concurrently. And for those accounts, we look at an enterprise impact score. So think of it this way. If I'm a small customer with 20 people, I can +1 the user impact score. But if I'm a large account like a big bank, and I've got 20,000 users, I want to have a little bit more of a weighting on things that are important to me as well. So we do track these a couple of different ways, and product managers look at a lot of this information, and I am directly involved in helping facilitate that as well. I see a lot of the requests that come in, especially on the enterprise side, and am consistently working with all of our product managers to give that more visibility for those types of accounts. So in terms of kind of best practices in general on compelling direction, again, setting your North Star. Don't worry about the constellation of all the minutiae of things that are easy to itemize, but rather have your North Star, set and define goals, give them measurements, and sanity check that on whatever periodic frequency makes sense for you, and understand the feedback that comes from that as well, whether it's internal, from a partner, from a customer. So this is something that, again, I've worked at a few different enterprise software companies. This is something that's not always done. This is something that's hard to implement, and hard to implement well, and I think Atlassian's done a pretty good job of it. I didn't mention up front, but we actually have a few giveaways here. I have some gift cards, Starbucks gift cards, but you have to answer a question in order to get it. So I've got 3 questions throughout the slide deck today, and this is actually the first one of them. So for you fortunate few who may know this, feel free to pipe in. If you don't, you want to take a guess, take a guess. I mean, worst you can do is get it wrong. If you were starting a company today, think of what your North Star might be, and keep it very basic. It doesn't have to be too complex. Kind of put yourself into that mindset for a minute. And then think of when Atlassian was founded about 15 years ago, and our 2 co-founders, Scott and Mike, had their own North Star that they defined. They had very simple goals that they had established. And Scott in particular said, our original goal was, there's a part A and a part B. Who in the audience wants to take a guess at either one? And if you come close, I'll give you the card, because I'm not anticipating everyone will know flat out, although I'd be very surprised. Who wants to take a shot? Yep.
Could be popular.
Popular's a good one. Popular or a certain customer account, I would have thought the same. It's actually not one of those though, but I would have guessed that as well. Anyone else have an idea? Yeah. Oh, sorry, there were 2 hands that went up. Yeah, we'll take yours first. What was that? Teamwork?
Yeah.
Friends of no, I don't think so. What was your answer back there? Certain amount of money. Yeah. All right. If the next guy isn't closer, I'm going to give it to you because you're the closest so far. Yes.
Collaboration platform for
Yep. Good guess, but no. Yours is actually the closest. So I'll give you the card first and then reveal what the answer was. So congratulations. There you go. All right. Their original goal had 2 parts. Remember, these are guys that were coming right out of university. So this is a few years ago, just by the actual amount. Their first criteria was just they wanted to earn more than $48,500. That was the best job offer they could get at the time. So they're like, if I can make a little bit more than that, I'd be happy. And the next one is an insight into both Atlassian and Australian culture. I think even more important than the salary was the fact that they wanted to go to work and not have to wear a suit. And this is the honest truth. There are blog posts that our founders have done around this. They just wanted to work for a cool technology company, make a fair wage, and not have to wear a suit and tie. So that's how simple your North Star can be. And look what Atlassian has turned into 15 years later. I mean, who would have thought that it went from such a humble beginning to what it's turned into today? After compelling direction, we want to talk a little bit around what other internal support, what other internal elements can we provide to help make sure that teams can effectively get things done. And again, I think we've each experienced this difference as well. When you start at a new company and you're given your laptop, quite often being onboarded, becoming part of the company, it takes a while. And I think a large part of why that is that a lot of documents and emails and one-on-ones and all the things that you do as a new employee, it's all locked up. It's all stored somewhere that nobody else can access. Sometimes some of that information should be secured, if it's personal or financial, fine. But I think a lot of that's reusable. And some companies do make bits of that available over time, but more often than not, I see that every effort to onboard a new employee is still kind of a one-off, an exception. There will be some things, some chat rooms, some internet HR pages that are made available, but usually you see this split on the types of information that are provided within a company. And what we've done specifically within Atlassian is we've kind of turned that around. Our own team space, so the team that I'm on, the solutions engineering team, the enterprise advocates team, the Asia Pac partner team, there are a lot of different team spaces on our intranet. All those pages are open by default. You create a new page, it's open. You can lock it down if you need to, but by default, it will be defined as anyone within the company can read it. And all of our team information is there. That includes the VTFM details that I mentioned earlier, different types of company information, policies, and different personal pages as well, internal updates, blogs, and so on. And it really is a reversal of that mentality from taking information that quite often is locked up in your email, locked up in your inbox, and flipping that around and just making it open by default. So again, you can secure things as you need to, but I think starting with that mindset of just always sharing it makes a big difference. And that has helped me out personally a number of times. I work with some of you and some of our partners, and I just got asked a couple of questions earlier on foreign language support for a couple of our products. I don't know offhand where that falls in our product manager's line of reasoning. But I can go to their personal page, I can go to their team page, and I can find those answers. So this helps on in a number of ways, actually. And this is actually one good example. So our product manager for Bitbucket, when there was discussion on evolving pipelines, a new feature called pipelines, rather than just making that available and putting the release notes out there and not really giving any context around it, the product manager actually shared all of their discussions within that team, all the analysis they did, the competitive angle, the pros and cons of different ways to actually implement it. And he shared that with the entire company, and he actively solicited feedback. This is a big change. We have people within the company who have worked for a number of different technology firms. What do you think? Is this the right direction to go? So he shared that. He provided full context and got a raft of comments around it as well. You will quite often get feedback from all parts of the company. Even if it isn't their primary function, you will still get input from a number of different areas as part of that. And it can only serve to make that improvement even better. Maybe they'll think of some angle, some ideas that you haven't thought of. Maybe they can recommend a best practice from another team or another company to make it that much more. But if you had locked it up in your email, nobody else outside your team would have ever seen it. It also allows the product team to make course corrections in real time. Maybe there was some piece of information that's significant enough that they should make a bit of a revision. Nothing drastic. It could be a name change or factoring in some other dependency on dates or some of the wording for the documentation that they'll provide as part of this new feature. But again, it just serves to make this decision process that much better, that much hardened before it goes out. And even though things are open and accessible by default, and I can find things by searching for them, we do want to see our employees, we do instill in them this idea of always sharing it. So almost in a social media fashion, if it's not on Facebook, it didn't happen. This is the same idea. You have to share it on our intranet or it didn't happen. If people don't see it, it doesn't matter. Our intranet is called our internal website is called extranet.atlassian.com. And again, software company, right? So acronyms. We call it EAC or EAC. And we actually have a page that says you have to put it on EAC or it didn't happen. Don't keep it in your email. Don't keep it on a document. Don't keep it on a whiteboard. Put it on a page on the intranet. Share it. Or it's of no real advantage to the company. We need to make sure that everyone sees this. And this is part of our culture that we instill. And there's actually a page with guidelines that this is the one I'm showing here, that tells people, here's what you should be thinking of to share that information and the process around it. That can present its own challenges on occasion. And this is an example of our own internal, where maybe things got a little bit out of control at one point, when there was a discussion on establishing a policy for Atlassian employees to bring their own device to work. Needless to say, it got a bit heated. So we had lots of people posting comments and reacted quite passionately. And I think passion is good. Passion means people care. As long as you're constructive about it, you're not tearing each other apart. I think passion is always a good thing. But sometimes you need a referee to kind of step in and sort out how to make this productive, how to make this actionable. And in those instances where that happens, it's not uncommon for one of our co-founders to actually step in and make the call. So I mentioned a quote from Scott, one of our co-founders. This is Mike, who actually stepped in this scenario and said, all right, time out. People have lots of good feedback. That's great. We'll take it on board. I saw some good things that we may incorporate, and we'll look at revising this policy. But let's kind of close out the comments on the page and move this into some consensus and driving this policy forward. So again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I've worked on teams where discussions can get heated, and if you trust each other enough, if you're willing to be vulnerable in that way, if you're open to having passionate interaction, I don't think that's necessarily bad. And I fully admit there are some cultural differences around this. How that might work in the US versus Korea versus Japan is not entirely the same. But I think conceptually, the idea holds that it's good to have these types of discussions. So in terms of other contentious types of activities, here's my second question. Somebody may actually know this. When there was a debate internally, early days of Atlassian, to name our flagship product, Jira. Does anyone know what the origin for the name Jira is? What is Jira derived from? Free gift card for someone who can figure it out. Yeah, what is it? Yep. He's got it. That's the answer. So Gojira is Japanese for Godzilla, and Jira is actually an abbreviated version of that. So that's absolutely right. Very well done. All right. You can applause for that. That's fine. Yeah, I didn't even know this when I first started until I prepared for a meeting in Japan, and somebody told me this, actually. But our developers were just Godzilla fanatics, and when they went to build, so before Jira existed, when they went to build that product, they actually were using Bugzilla, and they twisted that installation into referring to it by its Japanese name, Gojira. And over time, when they named the product, they just called it, lazy Australians, right? They just shortened it from Gojira to Jira. So the name Jira came from Godzilla. All right, so Godzilla, product decisions, debates. We're back on track. Here we go. All right. Third ingredient of the secret sauce for successful teams, the actual structure of the team itself. Again, I've worked for a number of companies. I've worked on a number of different teams. I've managed different teams and watched them grow over time. There are lots of criteria that go into how you structure a team, and it's always a trade-off in terms of how you do that. But before we get specifically to actual teams, even just for an individual employee, one of the things that Atlassian does, and that I was pleased to see when I started about a year ago, is that, again, there's a lot to go through when you start with a new company. There's a lot to learn. And even if you share a lot of that information, there'll always be a few things that are missing. So one of the things that we do is always assign you a buddy. It sounds kind of corny, it sounds simple, but it actually works. To help fill in those gaps, to have somebody who can show you around, who can get you going, who can make sure that your first day, your first week, your first month is as seamless and as easy as possible. When I started in Sydney, so Atlassian has about 3,000 employees now globally. And in fact, every week, every Friday, we have a global town hall. And they always lead off with, it's usually one of the co-founders presenting. They always lead off with the new hires for that week. I consistently see every Friday somewhere between 10 and 20 new faces that go up on that screen every week. So 3,000 employees currently, 10 to 20 that goes up at a time. And the day that I started, we had just moved into a new building and have about 800 employees in that location alone. So imagine how disorientating that can be, right? Brand new office space, everyone's getting accustomed to it. I don't know anybody. My manager actually sits in the US, so I am very much on my own on that first day. Having a buddy is tremendously helpful, somebody who's right there to walk you through things, to get you to your desk, to show you how to log on, kind of all the first day types of things. So we do that for every employee, especially as we grow at that kind of a rate. That's tremendously helpful to bringing those people on board. When we look at how we structure teams around any area, and especially with all these new hires, and I'll focus a little bit on engineering. If you think of the software developers, the designers, the QA engineers, systems administrators, there are a lot of different types of roles that fall into any particular sprint team. But they may work on a particular product or a particular sprint, but they always have similar disciplines that might need to be coordinated with other individuals as well. So QA engineer may work on a couple of different project teams, and of course they for reporting purposes, they fall under the organization of other quality assurance engineers as well. So whether that's for QA, whether that's for designers, and we want to make sure that as things improve or issues are encountered, that's reported across teams so we can consistently be making improvements. So we have a very fluid setup in this way for our own software teams, which ultimately leads to faster decisions. Again, all the decisions are done at the team level now, right? We gave them their North Star, they make the calls, we give them a flexible enough team, so that they can make those shots on their own. But even more importantly, having things structured in that fashion leads to greater understanding across the team and across the company, but in terms of developing products across that team. Everyone knows not just that a feature needs to be done, but why. Everyone knows what the results were of a particular build and what has to change going forward based off of that. We're always doing a retrospective. What worked well, what didn't work well, where can we improve? And we're going through that over and over again. Ultimately, all of these elements combine, kind of getting back to that psychological safety thing that I mentioned earlier, to making your team a safe place, to ensuring that regardless of your role, if I'm on a sprint team, that I can always have my say. When we do our stand-ups, everyone gets their say. Everyone can input, whether it's during that stand-up, whether it's when design documents are shared online, whether it's a retrospective that's being done. Everyone knows that they can speak and everyone will listen. Everyone gets their chance to contribute. Because, again, it really layers on top of this fundamental trust and respect that all the individuals have for each other. I'm no longer a day-to-day developer. I did that when I first got out of university. My job's a little removed from that now, but that doesn't mean that with 27 years of experience, I can't still make a suggestion now and then. I might still have a good idea. I'll leave it to the people who have those technical skills to actually code it. But why not allow other people in the company to provide their comments as well? And this type of a setup fully enables that. It leads to a couple of what can seem from the outside like a couple of odd rituals. And in fact, my first week at the company, I thought this one was a bit bizarre. So I mentioned when I started, first week, new office, 800 employees. I was on the 28th level, actually with a lot of our product teams. And out of nowhere, on my second or third day, everyone on the floor just started clapping. And so, of course, you just kind of follow along and look and don't know why you're clapping, but sure, I'll go with it. Come to find out afterwards, I wasn't on it initially, but we had an internal chat just for that floor, so that whenever somebody did something noteworthy, did something well, everyone on the floor would clap for it. And it's just this positive reinforcement, right? Safe place, psychological safety, positive reinforcement. Office clapping is one of those. So if you ever visit our office and you randomly hear everyone on the floor clapping, somebody did something noteworthy, just go with it, just clap. Yeah. Somebody did something that warranted, answering a question, something that needs to be recognized. We also will, on occasion, formalize that. And we simply just call it a kudos. If somebody does something a little above and beyond, puts in a little extra effort as part of their job, maybe helped a team that they didn't need to, or worked tremendously long on a project to get it done on time, we actually can internally submit a very basic form. And this is anybody. This is a peer-based recognition. You can go in, you can submit a form, and acknowledge someone through kudos. And that results in one of a few different gifts being given. That you actually select it as part of the write-up. You have to justify what you're giving the kudos for, who it goes to, some of the context around why that's being done. And actually, and this is without his foreknowledge, but it is something that I rarely get to do in public. Kudos are normally given in private, but if I could get Jason to come up to the stage here. Sir, I am honored on behalf of Atlassian to give you a much warranted kudos. So Jason, come up here, please. And you are all allowed to clap, of course. This is yours. It's for you. Yeah, it's not a prop, it's real. So funny that this was actually in my slide deck, and someone on his team asked me to give that to him when I was out here. Figured it would be something nice to give in public for a change. Usually it's just left on your desk. But good job, Jason. You'll have to let me know what it was for later. Now, that's all the positive side of things, and that's ultimately what we want to achieve. But I talked about safety and why it was so important and some of the benefits on improving productivity. But I think there's also value in the negative side of things too. And this is one example. This is an actual screenshot of a page internally. This is a post that someone wrote a few years ago now by the timestamp. And I won't translate the actual title, but somebody made a bit of a mistake. Somebody had a mishap internally. And you know, we've all done that in the past. I've made mistakes in my job before, and I think the natural inclination is to hide it or at least not advertise it. You don't want to usually make your failures publicly known. I think it's very telling of the culture in Atlassian, where it evolved to the point that this guy felt comfortable to say, I screwed up, here's what happened, here's what we learned, and here's what we'll fix so that it doesn't happen again. And I think as a company, as any company, if your employees are comfortable enough to share this kind of information, it's tremendously valuable. In fact, I would almost argue more so than some of the productivity benefits on the positive side that I gave earlier. Because yes, maybe somebody screwed up, maybe they made a mistake, but maybe it wasn't just them. Maybe it was an inconsistency internally. Maybe it was a process that wasn't very well defined. I guarantee you that more often than not, it's not simply a matter of somebody didn't do their job and you need to work on them as a manager. It's probably more that something else is broken inside the company. And unless you're willing to be that vulnerable, unless you're willing to actually have that conversation inside the company, A, you'll never know about it, B, you'll never fix it. So hiding your own failures is one thing. Again, very human reaction. I've done it. We've all done it. But inside of a company, it can be debilitating. I think it's very important to get teams to the next level to be willing to actually advertise these. And this guy was given a lot of congrats for having the guts to put this kind of a post out there. So I think that is the pinnacle of psychological safety, right? When you can actually stand up in front of God and country and say, I screwed up and here's what happened. But they learned from it and we got better. So third and final question, and this one should be a bit of a easier one at this point. These are actually all of our office locations currently for Atlassian. Which one, though, is Atlassian's actual, there's already a hand up in the back, Atlassian's actual headquarters? Hang on, I've got to get to the one that I saw go up first, because there are now like several up. So I saw your hand go up first. So what's the answer? Sydney is the right answer. There you go. Yeah, I think it would be easy to guess really a couple of those. Could have been New York, maybe Europe. We're listed in a couple of different areas. But Atlassian, our founders are Australian. Our largest share of employees are in Australia. Again, I said 3,000 globally, about 800, maybe 900. So almost a third or just under in that one location. All right. So finally, shared mindset as an aspect of successful teams. How do we get everyone not only the right structure and the right processes, but how do we mentally kind of get everyone on the team better aligned to be as successful as possible? And again, in this example, I'll use more software development as something to walk through here. So usually on a sprint team, you have developers that take different stories, different tasks, and each one is working on their own. I'm going to do feature X, you're going to do feature Y, and so on and so on. And that's what will occur until we've taken everything on that sprint and then we're done. What we do within Atlassian, though, is that we always, again, this buddy, we like this idea of a buddy. We always pair up programmers. We do pair programming for a couple of reasons. One, because if you've got a junior member of the team, you might want to pair them with somebody a bit more senior. to benefit from that experience. And even if they both have a fair amount of experience, you also want to provide that instant review, to think of different things that you may not always see. And that extends right down to the code level. Your programming buddy will look at code as you check it in and may ask you a question now and then, as you can see through the comment here. Why did you use this function call versus that function call? Or what was the logic in including this versus that? And it's not meant to criticize. It's not meant to challenge. It's meant to help produce the best code possible, right? Somebody else may have seen it work better for different reasons that you're just not familiar with. So let's factor that in up front versus waiting until the code's released in production and so on. And I just now see the warning that I'm getting over here, which I think we're good on, okay. So sharing those ideas, having a programming buddy extends not only across different developers, but even the different teams within the company as well. So these are actual snapshots of the hallway from the office in Sydney. And every time I walk around, I see this. And I can go and look at design ideas for any one of our products. I can see what the sprint the team is actively working on. I can see all the actual post-it notes and comments and kind of what they're thinking in terms of working on. And I can provide feedback. Anybody can walk up to one of these boards and provide their own feedback. And here you can see our no-suit policy well and truly in action. This is our usual attire at our Sydney office location, very casual. But everyone gets to have their say in terms of what may be occurring. What that means for you, and Jason mentioned this at the outset, but what all of this distills down into for you is the fact that we've seen through our own internal teams, through working with regional partners, through working with some very large accounts, a number of common themes, the 4 areas that I've called out, and some discrete best practices or tasks that you can repeat off of that. We've taken these practices and we've packaged them into what we're calling our team playbooks. And you can actually access these online. I've used as part of describing them software teams, but it's not limited just to that. And we give you both common measurements as well as a playbook, kind of an outline of here are the things that we've seen work really well, and here's how you measure it, whether you're looking at DevOps or project management or HR or just general software development. And we give you a lot of different packaging of these playbooks so that you can take advantage of what we've learned and what we've seen through some of our own customers as well. And that information is simply at Atlassian.com/teamplaybook. So definitely when you get a chance, go out there, take a look. All the PDFs are freely downloadable. And don't worry about scrambling to write too hard. I'm sure we'll make all these slides available. But that is the location where you can view it at. It is the benefit of our own experience, our own growth internally, a reflection of Atlassian over the last 15 years, as well as the over 100,000 customers that we now have. About 5,000 or 6,000 are enterprise size. So we've seen a lot of this in action across a number of companies, number of verticals, number of countries, and certainly a number of years as well. To wrap this up, there are, of course, not only the best practices, but a variety of tools that you can use to really help unlock that potential. I'm not going to go into all of these here. There will be other sessions today. There are hands-on sessions throughout the remainder of the day as well. But definitely get to know a bit more about using Confluence and how that may fit into your area, whether it's for a general project or software development, the ties it has to Jira software, how you can not only facilitate implementing, for example, Agile, but extending that to full-on DevOps by tying into code management, code deployment. There are a lot of products in here, and again, I'll leave it to other sessions to get into that a bit more. But just to lift that back up to what I started with, not only some of the best practices we've seen for teams, but the actual mission that we have here at Atlassian, and my own experiences that I've seen over my career as well. The fact that both of those in combination lead to some pretty amazing successes and really truly allows you to fully unlock the potential in every team. So I thank you for your time in dealing with the video glitch and your attendance today. I'm around for the remainder of the day as well, as was mentioned, and I'll be happy to have other conversations. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon.